Good morning. This morning, Roshi, Shinko, and I continue our talks on the Shin, which is affirming faith and trust mind. I think this is our fourth talk. We've been taking it line by line, and the Shin is a verse that was written by the third ancestor in China. His name was Kanchi Sosan, and he died in the year 606. And he was the Dharma, the grandson of Bodhidharma.
So don't worry about what you understand or what you don't understand. Just let whatever permeates your being, and what it doesn't permeate, let it drop away. It's okay. That's how we listen to Dharma talks. We don't really try to understand. They might not be understandable, but it might reach a deeper level than the mental. It might resonate with something deeper in you. So that's why we say listen with your whole body, not just with your ears. So just be present and open. That's all it takes, to be open. And whatever penetrates. And what it doesn't penetrate is that we don't need it at this moment. And many times that happens to Dharma talks or commentaries in sutras like this one, like we might have listened to it 100 times, and suddenly we say, after the 100th time, we say, oh, I never heard that before. And it's just that before we were not ripe to understand it. We were not ripe to allow it to penetrate. So we'll see what penetrates today.
So I'm going to start with the line that says, this ultimate finality is beyond all laws, can't be described. With great heart, one with the way, all ego-centered striving cease. So it's beyond all laws, and we have all kinds of laws. We have legal laws, we have laws of nature, but even none of these laws have any fixed nature to them. I mean, just for example, think in the short history of our country, that only white men, maybe even property owners, could vote. But then, more than 100 years later, women got the vote, and then after that, black people got the vote, and even felons, after they've served their sentence, can vote. So it's beyond law. Laws aren't fixed. Even laws of gravity, for example, Newton's laws of gravity, they were transcended by Einstein's, which might be transcended again. So this ultimate finality is beyond all laws. It can't be described. That's what Hakuin said, that the difficulty with that what makes our practice difficult is our ego-grasping consciousness. It's like we're trying to create a law of human nature, that my ego is such and such, and if I do such and such, then everything will be certain and safe and complete. And that's a problem, that we always want certitude. And that's what we're grasping after. That's what the ego grasping consciousness is. It's to give ourselves something definite, defined, and wonderful. So how can we live without this finality, without this certainty. And that's what Kanchi Sosan talks about in this verse. So I'm going to pass it to Roshis Shinko, and she'll continue the next two lines.
Doubt and confusion disappear, and so true faith pervades our life. There is no thing that clings to us, and nothing that is left behind. So I'm just going back a little bit with the lines that Roshi was saying. Ego-centered striving ceases when we see into the true self of things. We might try for many years, try to figure out things, how to do the right thing. And that's very difficult to do. But when we see into the true self of things, then it becomes clear. That's why it says, then doubts and confusion disappear. And it doesn't mean that we might not get confused about this or that, but the deepest truth, about the deepest truth, we don't get confused. So when this happens, there is no thing that clings to us, and true faith pervades our life. All this comes from this deep seeing into our true self. It's nothing external. So when we have seen clearly into our purpose in this life, this seeing is actually the true faith that will permeate our life. This life purpose that we have seen into is so deep that even though we engage in many activities, they don't stick because these are superficial things, superficial activities. We are connected with our true self at a much deeper level than that. So whether we enjoy or suffer in the relative world, nothing clings to us because we are anchored in our purpose on this earth. And that's unmovable. Yeah, like the tree in the high wind. It is in the Bodhisattva stages as expressed in the Avatamsaka Sutra, and I love to mention this. The Avatamsaka Sutra is like, wow, the best. That the Bodhisattva of the seventh stage won't return to samsara. The Bodhisattva that keep returning to samsara probably don't have deep enough anchor in his or her true self. The anchor is so deep that we don't have to worry about falling into illusion or not, because it won't stick. If we try to put ourselves up by saying, I'm in this stage or that stage, in this obsessing picture or that obsessing picture, we are really talking about ego striving cease. No, ego striving, no cease. We're trying to reinforce the ego. So the seventh stage of the obsessing pictures, I think that also corresponds with this. It says, astride the ox, I reach home, I am serene. The ox too can rest. The dawn has come. In blissful response, within my thatched dwelling, I have abandoned the whip and the ropes.
So all is self-revealing, void and clear without exerting power of mind. When we first start to sit, our mind is so busy that we have to try to control it. Our thoughts are jumping all over the place. If we're counting our breath, we can hardly get up to 3 without losing track. And so we have to keep exerting our mind on it. And as we continue to practice, the mind begins to settle down, become quieter, become less willful to keep wanting to exert its independence. And we reach a state, if we keep at it, where instead of me, Shishin, breathing, the breath is breathing me. It's almost like I'm not exerting any power of mind. It's just naturally taking care of itself. Now I see about 20 of you sitting there, and every once in a while somebody reaches up and scratches their head or rubs their nose. Now, did you have to exert power of mind to do that? Was that a great effort on your part to lift your hand up there and scratch your head or to rub your nose? In fact, you probably weren't even aware you were doing it sometimes, unless you have this itch that's driving you nuts. Then you have to exert power of mind when you're in the zendo not to scratch it. If you keep going back to your breathing, an amazing thing happens. It stops itching. Or not. But you just have to keep going. So naturally, we can do things without exerting power of mind. Like simple things, like I just mentioned, like walking, like standing up. Now, if you get old like I do, and you're sitting on the floor, you have to exert power of mind and power of will and power of
Whatever.
prayer in order just to stand up. But thought cannot reveal the state of truth, and feelings are of no avail either. The body's at peace, and it's beyond feelings. Feeling good or feeling bad, no such thing. So when we see clearly the emptiness of self, that's true peace, true freedom.
In this true world of emptiness, both self and other are no more. To enter this too empty world, immediately affirm not to. But the beginning of these lines reminds me of the illustration number 8 of the Oxiding Pictures. And the poem says, whip, rope, person, and ox, all merge in no thing. This heaven is so vast, no message can stain it. Nothing can stain it. How may a snowflake exist in a raging fire? You cheerfully come and go. How could you not always laugh? The oxerder and the ox are both gone. There is only a black circle. It represents emptiness. Earlier, when we became united with the practice, there was the idea that it is me, I, that was practicing. Now this has gone too. We realize that nothing belongs to us truly. We can only care for it while it lasts. We also experience that we do not have a solid, separate identity. There is nowhere to go, nothing to stick to. A great burden is let go of. We feel so light. we realize everything comes out of emptiness. Only because of emptiness can things change and flow. Emptiness is not a vacuum, a black hole, but the possibility of endless transformations. There is no more grasping or self-created barriers and limitations. And if they are, they won't stick.
And this not too, all is the same, with nothing separate or outside. The wise in all times and places awaken to this primal truth. You know, I mentioned that I read this verse many, many times in that line that Roshi said, to enter into this true empty world, immediately affirm not to. And in this not to, all is the same, with nothing separate or outside. And when I was first starting to practice, I used to write not to on Post-it notes and stick them around. And it was particularly helpful in my work when all of my idiot coworkers would come in and bother me. I would keep looking at not to, not to, not to, and it helped. And they weren't such idiots after that, because there's nothing separate. Now, the wise in all times and places awaken to this primal truth. I mean, there's many, many stories in Zen about the wise awakening to this primal truth. And Rinzai, Master Rinzai, the founder of the Rinzai school, said followers of the way, mind is without form and pervades the 10 directions. In the eye, it's called seeing. In the ear, it's called hearing. In the nose, it smells odors. In the mouth, it holds converse. In the hands, it grasps and seizes. In the feet, it runs and carries. Fundamentally, it is one pure radiance. Divided, it becomes harmoniously united spheres of sense. Since the mind is non-existent, wherever you go, you're free. And Rinzai is just talking about this mind and the emptiness of it and how we're not constrained by anything. But if you look through the history of Zen, you find out that there's masters who have been enlightened by seeing, hearing, smelling, touching, feeling. And of course, the Buddha himself was awakened by seeing the morning star. But there's two famous stories that are repeated over and over again I want to share with you. Some of you know them, but some of you may not. One of them is Reiyun Shingon, who was a student of Ison's, and he was enlightened when he saw the peach blossoms falling off the tree. And he wrote this verse. He said, "For 30 years I have looked for a sword master. Many times leaves fell, new ones sprouted. One glimpse of peach blossoms. Now, no more doubts, just this." I'll say a little bit more about that in just a minute. And in the hearing, there's a famous story about Kyogen, who lived in the 9th century in China. And he started his Zen practice with Hyakujo, and he continued with Ison after Hyakujo's died. And he was a very brilliant guy, and Ison asked him a question. He said, "Who were you before you were born?" And Kyogen couldn't answer. He kept looking in books and sutras and came with all of these convoluted, marvelous answers, and Isan rejected every one of them. And finally, he was so desperate that and dejected that he just left and ended up at the gravesite of the national teacher, Etchu. And he was a caretaker there, and he used to clean up the leaves and rake the gravesite. And you all know one day when he was raking, a piece of tile or pebble struck a bamboo. In the sound of hearing it, that awakened his mind. Suddenly, he was awakened, and he bowed down and to Isan, who he begged Isan to tell him, and Isan wouldn't tell him. He said that if you would have told me, I never would have had this great joy today. And those of you who have been studying the Mumonkan, you know Kyogen, his story was a man up the tree. He was asked, what's the meaning of Zen? And he said he was hanging from a tree by his teeth. He said, if you could answer, if you can't answer, you fail to, if you answer, you fall to your death. And if you don't answer, then you fail in your duty. So what do you do? So that's the same guy. But years later, centuries later, actually, one of Dogen's successors, whose name was Koenejo, wrote this. And I just want to read it. It's a paragraph. He said, the flowers bloom every year. Nevertheless, not everyone attains enlightenment by viewing them. Stones often strike bamboo. Still, not everyone who hears the sound clarifies the way. Only through the virtue of long study and continuous practice, with the assistance of diligent effort in the way, does one realize the way or clarify the mind. This does not occur because the sound of the bamboo was especially wonderful, nor because the color of peach blossoms was particularly profound. Although the sound of bamboo is marvelous, it does not sound by itself. It cries out with the help of a piece of pebble. Although the color of peach blossoms is beautiful of themselves, they open with the help of the spring breeze. The condition of practicing the way is also like this. This way is inherent in each of us. Still, our gaining the way depends upon the help of fellow practitioners. Though each person is brilliant, still our practicing the way needs the power of other people in the Sangha. Therefore, unifying your mind and concentrating your aspiration, practice, and seek the way together. A jewel becomes a vessel by polishing it. A human being becomes benevolent and wise by refining it. What jewel glitters from its inception? Who is brilliant from the onset? You must polish and refine. So do not demean yourselves and do not relax in your practice of the way. An ancient said, do not spend your time in vain. Now I ask you, does time stop though you hold it dear? Or does it continue even though you lament? You must know that it is not time that passes in vain. It is the person who spends it in vain. This means that human beings, just the same as time, have to devote themselves to the practice of the way instead of spending their time in vain.
The way is beyond all space, all time. One instant is 10,000 years. Not only here, not only there. Truth right before your very eyes. There is a verse in the Mumonkan, in the case 47, um, which point to the experience that is expressed in these lines. In this poem of the Mumonkan, the word kalpa is used to express infinite time. And I think it's my favorite verse in the Mumonkan. And it says, this one instant as it is an infinite number of kalpas. An infinite number of kalpas is at the same time this one instant. If you see into this fact, the true self which is seen has been seen into. So the poem, the poem is saying is very close to this. The ways beyond all space, all time, one instant is 10,000 years. But in the Mumonkan, it goes a little further and says, when you realize this fact, the true self which is seen has been seen into. This is a very profound experience. It's a big moment of realization when past, present, and future collide. And I use this word collide metaphorically. This is not really collision, it's just the becoming one. They use the metaphor as colliding as one with tremendous awareness and consciousness in this particular moment of the experience. And I want to read you a passage from the St. Christus and the Snake. That night at Pat Hawk's retreat, after crying torrents of tears and before going to bed, I looked out of the window and I saw that my eyes were the shining stars. There were lots of them. My mind had gotten so big and my heart so expanded that I had a clear revelation that the stars were actually my own eyes looking at my eyes. There was no separation between my eyes and the stars. My eyes were the stars and the stars were my eyes. I went to sleep with a very tender and soothing feeling in my heart. I felt loved by the universe. I had experiences like that when I was studying at the Rochester Zen Center. And I will never forget the head monk then, Dana Henry, which he later became a teacher and was the abbot at the Denver Zen Center. And I just happened to study with him later on. And he was at that time the head monk, and he was supervising the SAMU. And he was telling me as I was cleaning, concentrate, let go, put everything into it. You can experience the whole universe in a speck of dust. And he was right. He was right.
Distinctions such as large and small have relevance for you no more. The largest is the smallest too. Your limitations have no place. So when we look at distinctions such as large and small, like Roshi just said, you know, the universe in a speck of dust. And that reminded me, there's a verse of William Blake. He said, to see the world in a grain of sand, and the heaven in a wildflower, and hold infinity in the palm of your hand, and eternity in an hour. When you're sitting zazen and your legs are hurting, you experience eternity in half an hour. And sometimes when you really are deep into your concentration, that half an hour seems like a second. It's so subjective. our mind is so strong, trying to control everything. I read a book years ago when I was in college. It said, I'd been down so long, it looks like up to me. So what is down? What is up? What is big? What is small? We have a koan that says there's no large and no small in the Dharma. Some of you, that's a koan in our miscellaneous koans. You'll come across it. So everything, is relative. When we were small kids, walking in a crowd of people, everybody towers over us and we can't even see the horizon. We don't know where we are, what we're doing. And yet, as Dogen said, no creature, large or small, ever fails to completely cover the ground, complete and whole unto itself. That's what they're talking about here. If we let go of our ego-grasping consciousness, then the world opens beyond our wildest imagination.
What is not. What is not is. If this is not yet clear to you, you're still far from the inner truth. So the whole universe is interrelated. So we say that everything is one. In this oneness, there are no dualisms. And this is why I always hear people saying that haven't practiced Zen or don't understand Zen, that Zen always contradicts itself. And it's because of this experience of unity, where all dualism become one. And this cannot be understood conceptually. It's an experience. And then we embody the experience. It's not something that we figure out, no. It's something that we embody at some point. All dualisms have become unified because the mind has become unified. Everything is in constant flux and changing. So if we say this is it, trying to pin down what is, then it's not. If we reject anything and we say this is not, then it is. We understand this when we have a deep realization into the nature of all things. I have noticed over the years how people that had not had an experience of emptiness yet, they get very attached to their opinions, so much as to give their lives defending their opinions or even killing someone who disagrees with them. And you see this in our country today, the tragedy of this country and many other countries, the tragedy of the planet. When we have a realization into the empty and sacred nature of all things, then our opinions don't stick to us. It's something so much deeper than opinions. We can have opinions and we can then let them go. We can hear other people's opinions and be impartial to those opinions or not. But even when we are not impartial, we can let them go. Because nothing can compare with the empty, sacred nature of our own mind.
One thing is all things are one. Know this and all's whole and complete. When trust and heart are not separate, and not separate our heart and trust, this is beyond all words, all thought. Like Shinko said, it's when you realize it, your whole body realizes it. And Zen practice is a body-centered practice. It's not a mental practice. We tap into the wisdom of our body. One thing is all, and all things are one. So this was before the Three Musketeers. This was written, when the Three Musketeers said all for one and one for all. But they understood how we all work together to support each other, like one body, which we are. Know this, and all's whole and complete. See? We're all unified, but at the same time, we all are separate or distinct, but we're all one body, like the parts of one body. And I'm sitting here, the wind has picked up a little bit more, and there's still some more leaves on the trees, and I'm just watching the leaves falling off the trees, and they just make a beautiful image out the window. These falling leaves, each one falls in its own place, but at the same time, they're part of this grand vision. So when our faith and our trust and our heart are not separate, it's beyond all words and all thoughts. It is just this one reality.
For here, there is no yesterday, no tomorrow, no today. It was also at the Rochester Zen Center when I started to practice Zen that they told me that if I put all of my energy wholeheartedly into my hara, that it was compared to a magnifying glass, summoning all the...
Focusing.
No, summoning. It's metaphorically.
Summing.
So, gathering all the rays of the sun into this small glass. And the same thing with our hara. And they were also telling the truth. It was true. So at some point, we will realize that past, present, and future unify in this single experience of consciousness. And then we can realize on our own that there is no yesterday, no tomorrow, no today.